Tonight, what we are looking at is not just another international conflict update. This is something far more serious, something far more dangerous, because when global powers begin reacting instead of thinking, when decisions are made through threats instead of strategy, that's when situations stop being controlled and start spiraling. And right now, that spiral has already begun. At the center of it all is a series of decisions that, according to multiple developments unfolding on the ground, may have pushed the situation into a point where stepping back is no longer easy. Let's begin with the moment that set the tone, and a powerful explosion and captured on camera as an Iranian medium-range ballistic missile struck a city in southern Israel, an area widely reported as highly fortified and strategically significant. This was not just another strike. This was a message. That location matters because that region is believed to house some of Israel's most sensitive infrastructure, including facilities tied to its nuclear program. And the fact that a missile was able to reach that zone, despite layers of defense, immediately raised a critical question. Has the balance of deterrence started to shift? This strike did not happen in isolation. Earlier the same day, the United States and Israel had carried out coordinated attacks targeting Iran's nuclear infrastructure, specifically the Natanz facility, a site that has long been central to Iran's nuclear ambitions. That attack was meant to send a signal. But what followed was a response that sent an even louder one. Iran didn't just respond symbolically, it responded directly, it didn't strategically. Missiles followed, targets expanded, and suddenly what looked like a contained military action began turning into a broader regional escalation. And then came the statement that changed everything. Donald Trump issued a public warning, not behind closed doors, not through diplomatic channels, but openly. He gave Iran a 48-hour ultimatum: open the Strait of Hormuz or face destruction. Not just military retaliation, not just strategic strikes, but the threat to obliterate Iran's energy infrastructure, beginning with its largest power facilities. Now, pause for a moment and think about what that means. Energy infrastructure is not just military. It powers cities, hospitals, water systems, civilian life. And when threats like this are made publicly, they don't just escalate tensions, they redefine the rules of engagement. Iran's response came quickly, and it was not just defensive. Iran's military spokesperson made it clear, if their energy infrastructure is targeted, the response will not be limited. It will expand to include the energy systems of U.S. allied nations across the region, to include desalination plants, facilities that provide drinking water in some of the most water-scarce regions in the world, to include technological infrastructure, in other words, a regional disruption, not just war, but system-wide consequences. And this is where things become even more dangerous, because what we are now seeing is not just retaliation, we're seeing escalation dominance, a strategy where each side tries to prove that it can go further, hit harder, and expand faster than the other. Trump threatens, Iran responds, strikes are exchanged, targets widen, and with each step, the risk multiplies. Meanwhile, something else is happening quietly in the background. The global economy is reacting. Oil prices are surging. Markets are becoming unstable. Traditional safe havens like gold are behaving unpredictably. Cryptocurrency markets are showing signs of stress. And all of it connects back to one critical location, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow passage controls a massive portion of the world's oil supply. And right now, Iran is exerting control over it, not just militarily, but economically. Reports suggest that Iran is not only restricting movement, but also negotiating directly with countries, offering passage and providing naval escorts in exchange for payment. That changes the dynamic completely, because instead of being isolated, Iran is now positioning itself as a gatekeeper, a power broker. And countries that depend on energy imports are being forced to make choices, adapt, or face disruption. At the same time, questions are growing about the broader strategy behind all of this. Because while the rhetoric suggests strength, the outcomes are more complicated. Sanctions have shifted, oil flows have changed, and in some cases, Actions taken during this escalation appear to have resulted in economic advantages for Iran, including increased revenue through oil channels. And that contradiction is raising eyebrows because on one hand, there is confrontation. On the other, there are openings. And in the middle of all this, communication appears to be breaking down. Reports indicate that attempts to establish negotiation channels are struggling. Iran's leadership has signaled that it is not interested in talks, at least not under current conditions. And their position is clear. No discussions without guarantees, no agreements without compensation, no return to previous frameworks without significant changes. Which means diplomacy is not just stalled, it's rejected. And when diplomacy disappears, then only two options remain: pressure or escalation. And both are already in motion. And there's another layer to this situation that cannot be ignored: military effectiveness, because recent developments suggest that Iran is adapting. And instead of focusing only on major cities like Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, strikes are now targeting smaller locations, areas that may not have the same level of advanced missile defense coverage. Systems like THAAD and Patriot batteries are spread thin, and reports indicate that some of these systems, along with detection capabilities, have been targeted or disrupted. That creates gaps. And in those gaps, the missiles get through. The result: injuries, damage, and a growing sense that no area is completely secure. At the same time, messaging from leadership has become increasingly unpredictable. While the situation intensifies, public communications have ranged from threats to personal commentary, to statements that appear disconnected from the realities on the ground. And that disconnect is being noticed, not just by analysts and not just by governments, but by the global audience watching this unfold in real time. Because in moments like this, consistency matters, clarity matters. And when those are missing, uncertainty grows. And uncertainty in a conflict like this is dangerous. There are also broader geopolitical consequences taking shape. Countries are reassessing alliances. Energy routes are being reconsidered. Alternative shipping lanes are being discussed, including increased attention on the Red Sea. And groups aligned with Iran, including forces in Yemen, have signaled that they are watching closely and waiting for the next move, waiting for a trigger. Because if another front open, the scale of this conflict changes entirely. And suddenly what began as a series of strikes becomes something much larger, something global. Back home in the United States, the situation is adding to existing pressures: economic concerns, cost of living, job stability, and now like the uncertainty of international conflict layered on top. At the same time, domestic crises continue, natural disasters, emergencies, and challenges that require attention. But in moments like this, focus becomes divided and leadership is tested, not just by external threats, but by internal expectations. So where does this go from here? That's the question no one can answer with certainty, because once escalation reaches this level, outcomes become unpredictable. One decision can change everything. One miscalculation can expand the conflict. One response can trigger another chain reaction. And right now, all of those possibilities are on the table. What we are witnessing is not just a conflict between nations. It is a test of strategy, a test of restraint, a test of leadership, and most importantly, a test of how far each side is willing to go, because history has shown us this: it's not the first strike that defines a conflict, it's what happens after. And tonight, the world is watching what happens next.